There is a legend that the Queen Kapiolani, the great-grandmother of Queen Liliuokalani, took sacred berries into the mouth of a volcano and threw them in while singing. She was singing Christian hymns and breaking the curse of Pele, the creator goddess of Hawaii, on its hearts of the people. American missions of the 19th century were successful in integrating into the daily lives and spiritual lives of Hawaii, but often at the expense of native culture. In 1820, the American Board of Commission for Foreign Missions was sending roughly 100 missionaries to the Hawaiian Islands, otherwise known as the Sandwich Islands, which had only been recently discovered by Captain Cook in 1778. Interest in the Hawaiian Islands began with Henry Ubakaya, who came to study at Yale in the early 1800s. His presence and conversion to Christianity brought attention to the Hawaiian Islands for the ABCFM. He even translated some of the Bible into Hawaiian. Before leaving for their journey, they listened to a sermon by Reverend Humphrey, which emphasized piety and a strong will to obtain their goals. Interestingly, the pastor does not emphasize faith or the power of the Holy Spirit, but asks the question, what if the Israelites had stayed focused on their original goals? He also details instructions at the end of his sermon, saying to focus on children and missions and establishing schools to be most effective. He stated that the men would be soldiers of the cross in the Holy War, and the women would provide vivifying examples of Christian femininity to the rude and depraved people of Hawaii. In May of 1820, the missionaries arrived on the Thaddeus, just shortly after King Kamehameha I had passed away. Since this king is known for unifying the Hawaiian Islands despite American intervention following the discovery by Captain Cook, this is seen by historians as an opportune time for the missionaries to arrive, since it was now in a state of religious and political disorder. John Charlotte, the leading expert in Polynesian history, describes the assimilation process of Christianity to Hawaii. He compares it to that of ancient Greece and Rome. He says it starts in 3 phases. First, there is initial resistance. Second, common threads between the competing philosophies are found. And third, the new faith is claimed as a cultural feature. Step 2 of this process can be clearly seen in initial schools and churches built, but also in Hawaiian literature. The leading priest at the time in native Hawaii was Hiawatha, and he recognized that the God these missionaries brought in the Bible could be solutions to the political and social unrest of his time. To bridge this gap, he wrote several chants that combine native language and Christian theology, using words like mau, meaning enduring, to bring to natives the concept of eternal, and words like kea and kapau to describe light and darkness for God and Satan. We can see that these missionaries had altruistic goals, but did they care for Hawaiian culture? Leading historian on Polynesian history, Cachet, argues that they disregarded, and in her words, undermined, the culture of the natives. She argues from a strong Marxist standpoint that the economically weak people of Hawaii were taken advantage of by the missionaries. They would invite native women to dine on their ships to share the gospel with them, but this was considered culturally disrespectful as women were not allowed to dine alone with company. Another historian describes the failings of the medical missionaries who came along. The Hawaiian Islands had been struck with syphilis since the arrival of Captain Cook in the 1770s. This historian describes the international trade in Hawaii as both, quote, object and in germs. Journals that these medical missionaries wrote made islanders look weak while making the islands at the same time look very appealing, thus making it more susceptible to imperialism by the United States. However, this historian notes that these missionaries did, in his words, bemoan the loss of native lives because they missed the opportunity to hear the gospel. Another possible example of cultural insensitivity by the missionaries was between Queen Kamalahu and Sybil Bingham, one of the missionary wives. She was to make a dress for the queen, but the queen requested a more comfortable skirt, which the missionary wife refused. The missionary wife saw this as a familiarity between the two women in Hawaii that was seen as disrespectful in gift-giving customs. While both historians and others describe the unintended consequences of the missionaries' presence, both acknowledge an altruistic nature of the missionaries, even if the consequences would eventually lead to imperialism by the United States. One possible victory and short-term effect of the missionaries' presence is seen in 1827, when the missionaries were able to persuade the king to institute laws based on the Ten Commandments. Some historians, however, question whether this was done for political ends or out of a sincere conversion. The age of imperialism was a dark time in world history. Many civilizations were taken advantage of by the militarily and economically stronger European and North American countries. Because of this, the missionaries were often seen in textbooks and in documentaries and unfairly categorized with the imperialists themselves. Looking at those initial missionaries who arrived to Hawaii, there are consequences that can be seen leading into the imperialist actions of the United States during the reign of Queen Liliuokalani, and also even up to more recent history.
On the other side at Iolani Palace, there were sharpshooters pointed out. There was still tension in the air that something might happen, but when the Hawaiian flag was lowered, it was said that it was cut into small little 2 to 3 inch ribbons and given out as tokens of remembrance to the sons and daughters of the missionary families, so that they could keep those as little tokens of their great victory over the Hawaiian kingdom and the end of the tyranny of the Hawaiian monarchy.
So here lies the central question that historians have to interpret. Did the missionaries intend to take over the culture of Hawaii and contribute to imperialist action, or did they have genuine goals to convert the people of Hawaii? Queen Liliuokalani, the last monarch of Hawaii, describes how she grew up attending a royal school and then later was attending a school run by a reverend. She also describes a coronation which opened with prayer, thus showing within the short amount of time that the missionaries had been present in Hawaii, they had already been culturally accepted. This native dethroned queen had plenty of reason to be angry with Americans who came to Hawaii, but she spoke fondly of these missionaries and their efforts. Additionally, British author Robert Louis Stevenson, who is famous for his work Treasure Island, speaks fondly of the American missionaries in Hawaii. In a famous public letter exchange, Stevenson famously chastised one ill-behaving minister who was accused of libel against another minister who had been working with Hawaiian lepers. Stevenson publicly praised early missionary efforts and that this pastor that he was chastising for not living up to their work. While American history is usually not kind to people looking back, 100 years after the illegal overthrow of Hawaii, an apology bill was created during President Clinton's time in office. This Democrat apologized for the work of Republican McKinley's presidency and condemned government actions while acknowledging and not condemning the missionary actions of Hawaii. He also specifically mentions in the bill the United Church of Native Hawaiians. In conclusion, these missionaries did have a strong and clearly only religious motivation for coming to the islands, not economic like other Americans. While modern historians take a traditionally Marxist view of these events and see it as American culture spreading and dominating Eastern culture, it does seem that these missionaries had good motives and made a lasting and, if not positive, impact on Hawaiian culture.